So now that we've had our templates and template stacks created, as well as added values to the templates, the next step that I want to show you is how to add firewalls to be managed by Panorama. This consists of two major steps, which can then be broken down into smaller steps. The first step is to tell Panorama about the firewalls that it should be managing, and the other step is to tell each firewall to be managed by Panorama. So the first thing that you need to do is to get the serial number from both devices. I've already done this, but here's a serial number for the San Antonio office, and then here's the serial number for the Portland office. I've already copied both of these and placed them in a text file, which is open here. Okay, so now that we have our serial numbers, I'm going to actually select them all and then hit Control-C to copy them. So let's jump back over to our Panorama device. Okay, so now that we're in Panorama, I'm in the Panorama tab, and then I'm going to scroll down and click on Summary, which is located under Manage Devices. And if you think the best way to add devices to Panorama would be by clicking on the Add button, you'd be 100% correct. So I'll click Add, and I'm going to enter Control-V to paste the values in. And then starting with PanOS 10.1, we need to generate an authentication key that's used by both Panorama as well as the firewall itself. So I'll click Generate Authentication Key, and I want to go ahead and copy that to my clipboard. So I'll click the button to copy that to my clipboard, and then I'll click OK. So here are our two firewalls, and the next thing that we need to do is to determine which device group and which template stack they belong to. We don't have our device groups configured yet, so I'll just leave that blank for now. But for the template stack, we know that both of these firewalls are going to be for remote offices, so we can confidently add them to the global remote office stack. We'll do the same thing for the other firewall. If you wanted to, you could have these devices added to a collector group and a log collector, but we don't have any of that configured right now, so we'll leave that blank. Additionally, you could have Panorama automatically push the configuration to the devices once they connect. And finally, if you wanted to, you could have Panorama upgrade these devices to a specific software version. But for now, we're going to keep this all simple, and I'll click OK. Okay, so we have both of our firewalls. As you can see here, they're not connected, and that's because we need to tell each firewall to point itself to Panorama. But before we do that, we need to first commit these changes to Panorama. So we're going to click Commit, and then commit the changes to Panorama. Click Commit one more time. All right, and while that's committing, let's jump over to our Portland firewall. So to add the firewall to Panorama, I'm going to click the Device tab, and then under Setup and Management, I'm going to click the Panorama Settings sprocket once that loads. There we go. So the first thing that we need to do is to enter the Panorama IP address, which is 172.20.1.99. And if there was a secondary Panorama server, you would just add that here. And then the last step is to enter the authentication key. So I'll hit Control-V to paste that in. I'm going to leave everything else set to the defaults, but the last thing that I wanted to point out is that if you wanted to, you could have firewalls not receive any policy and objects, nor device or network template updates from Panorama. We don't want to do that, but I just wanted to point out that it's available. So I'll go ahead and click OK. All right, that looks good. So I'll go ahead and commit these changes and commit again. And then while that loads, I'm going to jump over to the other firewall. And just to show you the difference, this firewall is actually running 10.0.6, so it does not need to have the authentication key entered. I just wanted to point that out in case the firewalls that you're working with have not been upgraded to PanOS 10.1. So again, to tell this device to be managed by Panorama, I'll click on Panorama Settings. And as you can see here, there's no place to enter the authentication key. So I'll just enter the IP address of our Panorama server, which again is 172.20.1.99. And I'll leave all the other settings set to the default and click OK. And then commit these changes. All right, those changes have been successfully committed. So let's go ahead and close out of this. Let's verify that the Portland firewall successfully committed their changes. And it did, so let's close out of this. And then let's jump back over to Panorama to take a look and see if those devices are communicating with it. So I'll go ahead and click the refresh option. And there we go. We can see that both devices have successfully connected. We can see the device name, what model it is, the serial number and IP address. If we scroll over to the right, we can see other information such as which template it belongs to, the fact that they're out of sync, and that just means we haven't pushed the configuration to the devices, so that all makes sense. Continuing to scroll to the right, We can see even more information, such as a software version, the difference between the configuration on the firewall and what's configured in Panorama, as well as apps, threats, and antivirus information. All right, that all looks good. And in the next clip, I'll show you how you can use variables, so that way you don't have to configure the same settings over and over again. Rather, you can use different variables in your templates to have the information automatically pushed to your device, which will save you some of the administrative burden.